Welcome back to Small Caps, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Kerry Stevenson. It's the Christmas edition. 'Twas the night before Christmas, she said. Well, actually, it is. It's almost Christmas upon us. So I'd like to tell you a little Christmas story, but today it's with Matthew Bowles. He's the Managing Director of Alto Metals. For those of you that don't know, Alto Metals, look, they're an advanced Western Australian gold explorer over there in the Sandstone belt of WA. And it's got a really long history. I don't want to talk about it. I'm going to get Matt to talk to you about that. But hey, there's a book that Matt's going to show us in a minute. So if you haven't come up with a Christmas present for somebody, then Matt, where's that book that we were talking about before? Because this is all the history, isn't it?
That's here, Kerry. It's Sandstone from Gold to Wool and Back Again. So it's a pretty thick book, as you can see. It's
busy.
It will. We've given this out to a few supporters of the company, certainly some brokers and investors. Just an interesting light read over Christmas. But look, it just goes really back into the background as we were talking about before. I mean, Sandstone's had a really, really long history. It's had, gold mining since the early 1900s, and that's where obviously two of our sort of high grade mines initially were mined, and then sort of the history from then from the number of pastoralists coming in. So it went through a farming period and then obviously back to gold again. But there's been a very, very long history, which makes a really interesting read and part of the uniqueness, I think, of Sandstone as well.
Matt, before we get into the guts of today's commentary, I guess, why do you like Sandstone? Is it because you've been in this business for a while, but you're starting to turn Alto Metals around, increasing the resource, getting a lot more interesting, but you're doing it in a very systematic, structured way, I guess. Why do you like Sandstone as a project? What are you seeing?
Oh, a number of things, I think, Kerry. I mean, I followed the story for a long, long while. When I first came back to Perth from London, and so Troy Resources were having a lot of success there at the time, and then I watched them sort of move to South America. And you look at the scale of the project, and you're looking at a different gold price environment when Troy were really having a lot of success there. But the scale of this project really hasn't had the level of systematic exploration that a number of other gold belts have. And, from my background, a number of the very, very smart geos that I work with, who technically I respect, they've got some, amazing knowledge. I'd ask them about Sandstone, and they all love it. They all really, really love it. And I think what we're now demonstrating, certainly over the last couple of years, is that Sandstone's certainly not done. There's a lot of gold left in the ground, and we've demonstrated that from the resource growth at the moment, sort of now at 635,000 ounces, which a couple of years ago we were maybe sort of down at 150, 200. So it's significantly grown, and it will continue to grow as well, with what we're demonstrating with the resources that we're growing and some of the fantastic results now from Indomitable. So when you look at it on a belt scale compared to Agnew belt, which is the next belt sort of over to the east, that's got over 10 million ounce gold endowment, and Sandstone, it's already produced over 1.3 million ounces, but it hasn't had that much deeper drilling yet, and that's where we see the long-term growth. But it really hasn't had that systematic exploration at surface that we see. And, that gold's got to be coming from somewhere. And so that to me is what intrigues me, along with the history as well. But we can just see that significant growth potential that's there.
When you just mentioned the word systematic, what's been done in the past? And what do you mean by systematic? What does that look like? Unpack that for those of us that may not have as much knowledge as you do as to why that's important and what it looks like.
Yeah. Well, for our view of systematic, it's that focus and that priority where if you look at our presentation, and there's targets all over the whole sort of 750 square kilometres of ground that we have. And they're all, really advanced, brownfield targets. They're all historic mines, or they're sort of, it's walk-up drill targets, or, historical resources that haven't had that growth. And part of the challenge initially was because Sandstone's got that history, and certainly here in West Perth, everyone's got their favourite target at Sandstone.
Is that right?
Yeah. So we're always getting asked, why aren't you chasing this target or this target? And look, they're all very good questions, but I think for us, we needed to get rid of a lot of that noise and sort of focus on a story that investors could understand. And, when you're a smaller company as well, you really need to sort of get the maximum value, I guess, return on investment for your drilling. And we didn't really want to go out and start drilling, a couple of 1,000 meters at one target and 1,000 meters another, and then sort of just not really have any real direction. So we went back initially to the Lords, or Lord Nelson, as you know, sort of that was one of our historical pits there. And we started to grow the resource significantly at the Lords. And then we started to expand further along that Alpha domain, which is that 20-kilometre long corridor, which hosts not only the Lords, but then Vanguard and Indomitable. And that's really where our systematic exploration focus has been. And it's really around sort of just continuing to grow those resources within that corridor. So it's like focusing on each of those deposits and putting enough meters in the ground that we really can understand the controls of mineralisation there and sort of how we can step out and continue to grow those resources, which is what we've done.
Let me ask you this. Why is it important, again, putting it in simplistic terms, why is it important to grow the resource? Because I know currently, and I think you said 635,000 ounces at 1.6 gram per tonne. And by the way, that doesn't sound like high grade to me, but I think there's some high grades in there. But I guess, why is it important to continue to grow it? And at what point do you stop growing it?
Yeah. Look, I think the thing is, 1.6 grams per tonne in today's environment is high grade the key thing about all of our resources, they're all shallow, open pittable. So it's got an optimized pit shells around those resources. So we're in Western Australia, which is a tier 1 mining jurisdiction. We've got, 635,000 ounces, all open pittable at a good grade of 1.6 grams, and those resources are all open. So for us, obviously, drilling and growing shallow open pittable ounces is a lot cheaper than drilling deeper and finding a lot, we've got no doubt that these resources will continue at depth. We've already shown that through the drilling that we've done. We certainly want to go and sort of test some of those depth extensions. But when we can see that these resources are still open along strike, it just makes a lot more sense from a company to keep adding those ounces as we sort of march towards that, that psychological, the first or the next hurdle, which is that magic 1 million ounces, which, everyone wants to get to, and then growing it from there to, 1.5 and beyond. And I think that's what we are continuing to demonstrate with how we've grown the resources at Sandstone.
When do you think you might hit the magic 1 million, and how much more drilling do you have to do to get to that?
Yeah, look, as I said, the magic millions, it is a psychological number.
Absolutely.
And I would hope that we drilled 40,000 meters this year at Indomitable. We've already got plans to go back and sort of carry on drilling at the same sort of level next year. I'd hope that we'll reach that at some point next year. That's what our objective is. And that's, I think, what we're sort of starting to do with all of the drilling that's going on. So
let's talk about some of those like funding and how because you talked about how you've done 40,000 meters in 2022 and that you want to do the same amount in 2023. How are you going to fund it, Matt? What's that look like?
We've got look, this year, almost last year. This year it's been a busy year already. We had obviously the resource upgrade in March of this year. We've had a massive drilling blitz. I said, we had a rig on site from February. It was pretty much drilling all year until sort of almost the end of November. We've had some fantastic drilling results out mainly from Indomitable. I think sort of like 25 meters at 7.5, 80 at 1.6. All again very shallow, sort of 30 sort of odd meters down. And that's all sort of, working towards that resource update. Next year, we've got, it is sort of, again, the same plan. And what we've got with our resource consultants, they're working on the updated resource. Then once that's completed, that will help us exactly target where we want to sort of go back and start drilling further, certainly at Indomitable and also at Vanguard, to continue growing those resources.
Funding. You got enough funds to be able to do all this drilling?
We have, yeah. So we just closed our funding. So we launched a small placement. So we've raised a total of $5 million, and that was through a placement. And then we opened an SPP. The SPP was very, very well supported. That's closed, oversubscribed. So there's 1.4 came in from the SPP, and then we topped that up with a further 700,000 in a I guess a subsequent placement. So we had about $5 million came through the door. Obviously, we've got some costs that came through, but we're certainly in a very strong position to hit the ground hard next year, both with a drill program, which we'll talk about in a minute, but initially at Aurora, and then going through back onto Vanguard and Indomitable.
Just to help those people that are listening understand about the way you're going to be spending the money next year, and that your stewardship, if you like, because it is a business and it's shareholder funds. How cautious are you, or are you confident with your drilling and you're confident with the program? Just want to kind of understand the strategy, I guess, going into 2023.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And I think, one of the key things with why we decided to raise the funding now is obviously with the resource coming out Q1 next year, and we wanted to be able to get back drilling, and we didn't want to have that overhang of everyone expecting us to have raised funding. So really, it enables us to execute on our strategy, which is still consistent. It's the same strategy. We're growing shallow, open pitable ounces, as we said before we started the call. We could have had 2 or 3 rigs on site again this year. That's what we had the year before. But with the market at the moment, obviously, sort of gold sort of is in a little bit of a lull, or from what I understand, sort of seems to have bottomed out now. There was no point us hitting it harder than we were, because we weren't getting the gold market in general wasn't getting the reward or recognition. And so that's why we sort of spread out the drilling for the full year. And that's pretty much the plan for next year. So we'll have 1 rig on site, and obviously we're very well positioned that the relationship we have with our drillers, that if we need to get a second rig, if the market starts responding, we can hit this and grow this resource a lot more rapidly. Okay. Obviously with more rigs on site. And I'm a big shareholder. I've got friends and family that are shareholders as well. So I think that's probably the key thing that aligns you the most, because I certainly get a bit of a ribbing from a few of my friends when we put some results out and nothing happens with the pricing at the moment. So I do have to remind them that we're not an orphan.
Well, you're not an orphan, and it's interesting that there's 2 things that I picked up on that. One, you've got skin in the game, so you're very well aligned with other shareholders. Like, that's it right. Does well, you do well. That's number one. But I also think it's interesting at the moment, the gold sector has been in a little bit of a lull, and people know that I've spoken about this in the past, that it's not going to last forever. And, in having a chat with Rick Rule recently, he said to me, I'm a contrarian investor. While nobody else is looking, I'm quietly accumulating and making sure that he looks at who's running the businesses. Are they aligned with shareholders? And if they are, he's very much of the view that this too shall change, not pass, change. Let's talk about next year's strategy in terms of drilling. Where? Because you've got the Laws, you've got Indomitable, you've got Aurora. There's, as you said earlier in the chat, there's a lot of places where people say, why aren't you drilling there? And why aren't you drilling there? Do you have to put the headphones on sometimes and go, not listening, because you've got your own strategy?
Yeah. Look, it's when I first got involved a couple of years ago now, and we were sitting down working about where we're going to go and start drilling to begin with. One of my technical consultants came up with a very good comment, which has really still stuck with me. And because we're working out, which target we go to next. And he basically said, he goes, why would you leave gold to go and find gold? And I thought it was a very simple but great comment. And I think that's what we've stuck with. So the strategy for next year, and the small part of, I guess, that differentiation is we did do a small drilling program at Aurora. So we took 2,000 metres at Aurora. And some of that background on Aurora, I mean, Aurora mine was one of the highest grade mines in Western Australia back in the day. It produced, 200,000 ounces at 16 grams per tonne. It was only mined down to about 140 metres depth. It was mainly mined through underground mining. And so it was mined back in I think mining started there about 1904. So it's sort of, there's a great period where, I mean, these guys were just targeting very, very high grade bonanza style gold mineralisation. Herald came back in the sort of early 90s, or sorry, was it 1994? They put a small open cut. They pulled out about 25,000 ounces, and that pit went down to about 60 metres depth. So really just mining out that oxide. And it hasn't had any drilling, any systematic drilling since then. And so we went in and we're spending quite a bit of time, and there was a number of these targets that are getting evaluated in the background. And Aurora is, obviously is a real standout. I mean, that was one of the ones that we often get asked, why aren't we chasing that? And we were doing a lot of work in the background, and we felt that it was ready to sort of just start having a look at that and in a position to start doing some drilling there. And this program was really we've identified a couple of targets where the reef could potentially extend further to the northwest and some extensions further to the south. And so this small program was really to go and, I guess, proof of concept. And does the reef extend there? And will the drilling confirm that? And then we can come back in and start chasing those higher grade zones. But, when you're getting results of, 2 metres at 55 grams in the reef, I mean, they're pretty exceptional. And that's what we wanted to sort of, start to target. But we didn't want investors to think that we're now getting distracted with, what the longer term strategy is about growing these resources at the Lords and Vanguard and Indomitable. But when you've got some headline grade like Aurora can deliver, for us, if we can see that and start to grow the resources there, because there's a lot of remnant mineralisation which has been left behind. And that's what we're looking to obviously bring hopefully into a new resource in the new year as well. So that's really our key focus on top of Vanguard and Indomitable. So the rig in the new year, it's going to go back to Aurora initially. And then once we've got the resource update and that's all been finalised, we'll understand the targets at Indomitable and Vanguard to go and sort of extend as well. So the biggest challenge is, where do we go after Aurora? Is it back to Vanguard or back to Indomitable? And I think that's going to be an interesting question, because they're both great targets, and I don't think there'll be any real reason as to why we start drilling at one rather than the other. We'll probably do some sort of campaign base between both of them, given to get the assays back from the labs and then move back. So we'll probably have the one rig moving between both.
2 rigs? Just want to put it out there. 2 rigs?
If some of the gold price predictions come true, certainly we might even have 3.
Yes, yeah. Well, I just want to pick up on something that I heard you say a moment ago, which was at Aurora. I think you said 2 metres at 55 grams per tonne. Is that correct?
That's right.
I mean, that sounds like really stupid numbers. Was that just was that somebody dropping some gold by mistake? Like, it sounds a bit crazy. What does that tell you? Is that just a one-off, or is that an indication of something that could potentially be a lot more?
When you look at the grade that Aurora produced from underground, which I said was 16.5 grams, I mean, that sort of highlights that grade that Aurora is. It's certainly a high grade quartz reef, and it's really for us, it's just to identify where that reef continues and start to chase that sort of high grade mineralisation down plunge.
All right, let's just do some numbers around this at the moment. I want to try, we're coming into Christmas, so let's try and wrap this up in a way that makes people understand where the value proposition is, I guess. Market cap at the moment, about, what is it, 36 mil, 40 mil? What's your market cap?
About 40 mil market cap, 35, 36 EV.
What does Matthew say about that in terms of the value uplift from what you're doing as you go work hard towards a 1 million ounce deposit?
Yeah. Well, I think there were two things there. I mean, so we're trading at about $55 an ounce, which certainly there's a number of peers that are trading quite a bit higher than that. I don't think our full sort of, I guess, that resource growth, obviously we're hoping we'll get some sort of re-rate once that resource comes through, and I think that's what a lot of investors are waiting on and watching on. Our discovery cost is certainly a lot less than $55 an ounce, so we're adding ounces at a much more incremental rate than what we're getting valued for. So, and I think we certainly, from a lot of the conferences that I've been at, we're getting a lot of recognition, certainly within the industry, for the results we're putting out and the quality of the project. And I think that will sort of like filter through. One of the things as well, Kerry, I think we mentioned this before, is that sort of, I mean, we've got a really tight register. The top sort of 70% is held by the top 20. And that top 20 hasn't really changed in the last sort of 3 years. So we've got some very, very long-term supportive shareholders. Most of them came into this last capital raising as well.
Okay.
So they see the long-term potential of Sandstone, and they're just pleased that we're back there drilling and aggressively drilling this, and getting the right team involved to help sort of unlock that value that we all know is there.
All right, put it into simplistic terms. What do you think is that long-term value for those people that are watching today that might not be shareholders? Not financial advice, ladies and gentlemen. You know the rules. But I just would love to know what your view is on where the long-term value is for those that may not fully understand Alto right now.
But I think that the long-term value is on that shallow resource growth. And all of our ounces are open pittable at the moment, and that's fairly unique for the grade that we're trading at. There's maybe quite a select sort of peer group that we're in, and as I said, they're all within optimized pit shells, so we've put some sort of basic economics around that, and we're sort of out there drilling, and we're kicking a lot of goals. We're getting some great results, and we'll continue to do so in the new year, and we're still sort of very focused on sort of not getting distracted on all the other targets that are there.
Where you are, because we're running out of time, I just want to ask you this couple of questions. One, it's really hot up there. Do you stop drilling, or do you keep going through, just going, oh, boys, put up with 50 degrees in the shade, you'll be right?
No. It is very, very hot in January and February. So the team they've done a fantastic job this year, and they're having a bit of break over Christmas.
Oh.
Yeah. So so I'm encouraging them to take a bit of time off and spend that with the families certainly over January, and then we'll be looking to be back drilling, I would say, sort of sometime in sort of February, early March.
Well, it's a pretty exciting time for Alto Metals, as I said at the start, ladies and gentlemen. It's about 600 kilometres north of Perth. It's bloody hot at the moment. Matt's going to give them a bit of time out. Matt, wrap it all up in a bow. 3 reasons why you think now's a great time for people to be sitting up and taking notice of Alto Metals right now.
I think the thing is we're fully funded. We've got a material resource update planned for the Q1 next year. We're going to be back drilling, one of the highest grade gold mines in Australia, and then we've got some fantastic results that we can see that Indomitable will continue to grow. That might be 4, but sorry.
That's okay. It's Christmas. We'll allow you to do an extra Christmas. And don't forget that book. Hold that book up again, Matt, just in case you're doing last-minute Christmas shopping. You can find out all about Sandstone, from gold to wool and back again, by Sally Senior. So if you want a last-minute Christmas present, go out and get that one. Matthew Bowles, great to see you. Thanks for coming back onto Small Caps. Merry Christmas, and we'll see you when the drilling starts back up again in sort of late February, early March.
Sounds good. Thanks, Kerry.